The courtroom was packed. Cameras rolled. Reporters held their breath. And then, Diddy stood up, said nothing, and walked out. The judge froze. Lawyers scrambled. And just like that, the trial came to a halt. What caused the sudden suspension? What secrets forced the court's hand? You're about to find out. The July sun glared down on the federal courthouse in downtown Manhattan, its heat doing little to temper the icy tension rippling through the streets below. Reporters, legal analysts, and curious onlookers swarmed the barricades like bees to honey, jockeying for position with cameras, microphones, and smartphones in hand. Satellite vans lined the curbs, banners flashing live, Diddy trial resumes, and the phrase had already begun trending on social media before the clock hit 9 a.m. Inside, the lobby buzzed with subdued urgency. U.S. Marshals posted at every entrance tightened their grip on radios and adjusted their vests with clinical precision. Today wasn't just another hearing, it was anticipated to be a turning point. Though no one could quite put their finger on what was different, everyone could feel it. The usually procedural flow of courthouse traffic was replaced by an unease that clung to every wall. Courtroom 5A, where the proceedings were set to continue, had already filled by 8:45. The media gallery was crammed, their seats overflowing with correspondents from the New York Times, Rolling Stone, TMZ, and international outlets hungry for the next explosive detail. Behind them, the public benches were thick with industry insiders and former collaborators, some out of concern, others out of pure voyeurism. Diddy had not yet entered the room. On the defense side, his team of suited attorneys sat clustered, heads bowed in whispered conversations. One of them, Elizabeth Marquez, the lead counsel, tapped the corner of her tablet with a rapid rhythm, her face pale and jaw clenched. No smiles. No small talk. Just an air of tightly wound nerves. To the left, the prosecution team sat more rigid, projecting the usual federal calm. But even they stole furtive glances across the aisle. Their lead, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jerome Nance, occasionally adjusted his tie and checked his phone, not for texts, but for updates that hadn't yet hit the courtroom. At exactly 9:01 a.m., the bailiff announced the arrival of the Honorable Judge Rosalind K. O'Brien. All rose, and all watched. Judge Breyer strode in with her trademark no-nonsense gait. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the room like a thundercloud. She looked out over the crowd, not for recognition or respect, she already had those, but as if silently daring anyone to waste her time today. You may be seated, she said crisply, then immediately addressed the court. Before we proceed, I have received a document submitted under seal this morning. Her words landed like a rock dropped into still water. The murmurs started immediately, not loud, but an unmistakable ripple of curiosity. Reporters jotted notes, legal experts leaned forward. What kind of sealed document could arrive this morning, just as testimony was set to resume? No explanation was given. The judge simply nodded to the bailiff, who handed her a manila envelope marked with 2 security tabs and a bold red confidential stamp across the flap. She took it carefully, slid a letter opener through the seal, and began reading. All eyes flicked to Diddy's counsel. Elizabeth Marquez still hadn't moved. At 9:06, the defendant finally entered the room. Diddy, dressed in a tailored charcoal gray suit and open-collared white shirt, walked with deliberate calm. No entourage. No flashy jewelry. Just him and a federal marshal trailing 6 steps behind. He didn't glance at the cameras or the audience. His eyes scanned the defense table, locked onto Marquez, and exchanged a barely perceptible nod before he Saturday. But something was off. He didn't greet the judge. He didn't glance toward the prosecution. He simply sat back, hands clasped tightly, and fixed his gaze on the envelope in Judge Breyer's hands. It didn't take long for the mood to shift. Within minutes, the judge's face, usually expressionless, had turned taut. Her eyebrows twitched. She flipped pages slowly, methodically, but with increasing intensity. When she finally looked up, the courtroom had gone utterly silent. I will be calling a brief sidebar, she announced. Ms. Marquez, Mr. Nance, approach. The attorneys obeyed without hesitation. They met the judge in hushed tones at her bench, voices barely audible. Meanwhile, the spectators leaned forward instinctively, trying to decipher body language. Marquez's shoulders were tight. Nance's jaw moved stiffly. Whatever they were being told wasn't routine. After 5 minutes, they returned to their tables, faces unchanged, but something had been set in motion. Court will proceed as scheduled, Judge Breyer said, her voice steady but a degree colder. However, certain evidence may be reviewed under restricted terms moving forward. Further rulings on admissibility will be made later today. Another ripple across the room. As the first witness of the day was called, a forensic accountant from Los Angeles, attention fractured. Half the reporters still focused on the testimony, but the other half kept eyes darting between the defense table and the judge's bench. It was no longer about what was being said, but what wasn't. No one had addressed the sealed document again. Not officially. Diddy sat motionless throughout. His face was unreadable, like a mask made of concrete. He didn't lean over to whisper to Marquez. He didn't shift in his seat. But to those watching closely, it was clear he was waiting for something. Just before the morning recess, a federal clerk entered the courtroom through a side door and passed another envelope, this time a slim file folder, to the judge. She took it silently, placed it on her bench, and made no comment. But the air changed again. When recess was called, media buzzed with renewed intensity. Cameras raced to capture Diddy's departure from the courtroom, hoping for even a flicker of emotion. But he offered none. Just that same silence, the same stillness. He didn't look back. The courtroom reconvened at exactly 11:15 a.m., but the atmosphere was markedly different. The air felt heavier, as though the room had absorbed the tension and decided to hold on to it. Reporters had barely left their seats during the short recess. Legal analysts whispered furiously into microphones just outside, speculating about the sealed document and why it had been delivered mere moments before testimony began. When Judge Rosalind Breyer returned to the bench, she didn't wait. Her posture was firm, her voice sharpened by purpose. This court has reviewed the contents of the sealed file submitted earlier this morning. Upon review, I have determined that portions of the communication logs contained therein are admissible and relevant to the case at hand. These communications will be read into the record under partial unsealing, she announced. Gasps and scribbles swept through the courtroom like a wave. Marquez flinched slightly. Her hands went to a legal pad, but she didn't write anything. Diddy didn't move, didn't blink, didn't shift. He stared straight ahead. Nance, the prosecutor, stood cautiously. Your Honor, the prosecution was not made aware of this material in advance. We request a delay to review the full scope. Denied. Judge Breyer cut him off. You will receive copies of the redacted pages now. Full review may be granted later if necessary, but this court will not be halted due to your lack of preparedness. A bailiff handed a slim packet to each legal team. It was no more than 10 pages, but it might as well have been 10 tons. Marquez opened hers, eyes scanning quickly. Nance leaned over his assistant, reading in real time. From the prosecution bench came a visible tightening of shoulders. Judge Breyer signaled the court clerk. Read the following into the record. The clerk stood and began, voice steady. Email dated April 22, 2017. From redacted at state.gov to s.combs@privatecloud.me. Subject, meeting arrangement. Sean, timing confirmed. Confidentiality assured. We'll coordinate with the intermediary directly. This remains under containment, per agreement. No further mention via open channels. Your leverage will be honored as discussed. Immunity discussion tabled until after delivery. The room went silent. Not even the soft clicking of keyboards could be heard. The words leverage, containment, and immunity hung in the air like smoke from a fire no one saw coming. The clerk continued. Email dated June 2, 2018. From s.combs@privatecloud.me to redacted at justice.gov. Subject, update. Containment protocols still holding. If names leak, we both fall. My cooperation should remain invisible, per your original language. I expect our arrangement to be respected. The press is circling. Any slip-up from your end, and I walk. Someone in the gallery audibly whispered, "What the hell?" The judge didn't respond. She motioned for the reading to continue. Message thread excerpt, September 2019. Encrypted text exchange. Govt 1. We may need to intervene. Images from Vegas leaked. Combs, you clean it up. That was not part of the deal. Govt 1. We never agreed on Vegas. Combs, doesn't matter. Containment is your job. Or this whole thing blows. The clerk lowered the paper. Nance stood again, more forceful now. Your Honor, the prosecution requests immediate clarification on the source and legality of these communications. We were not informed of any government cooperation agreements involving Mr. Combs. The judge leaned back in her chair. You'll have your opportunity to respond, Mr. Nance. But the court has determined these communications are genuine and were obtained through an internal audit linked to the defendant's digital property seizure, authorized under the existing warrant from November 2022. Marquez stood. Your Honor, these emails and messages were never part of discovery. If they were harvested during the digital audit, we request an emergency evidentiary review before any inference is made in front of a jury. Judge Breyer raised an eyebrow. There is no jury, Ms. Marquez. This is a bench trial. The court is capable of making its own judgment. The evidentiary review has been conducted. The pressure in the room grew almost unbearable. The content of the communications painted a damning picture, not of a crime per se, but of a relationship. A connection between Diddy and unnamed federal officials that suggested backdoor agreements, covert protections, and deals made in the shadows. If the implications were correct, Diddy hadn't just been defending himself in court. He'd been operating under the assumption he was protected by powerful entities. Nance sat down, stunned. He had come into this courtroom thinking he held the upper hand, that the day's testimony would tighten the noose around Diddy's carefully curated image. Instead, he was suddenly playing catch-up in a game he hadn't realized had already begun. The judge addressed both sides. This court will not speculate on the motive or content of the individuals redacted from these communications. However, we will explore the existence of said arrangements and their impact on this case. That includes subpoenaing potential federal officials as necessary. That was the real bombshell. Subpoenas. For the government. Diddy remained still, eerily still. The way one might when a long-feared truth is finally laid bare, but no longer matters. When the court broke for lunch at 12:30, reporters bolted for the doors. Cameras snapped as legal teams filed out. Protesters outside, some chanting support, others demanding answers, pressed against barriers as whispers turned into headlines. Did Diddy cut a secret deal with the government? Leaked emails reveal immunity promises to Diddy. Trial may expose federal back-channeling. Back in the courtroom, the sealed file was returned to the bench. Judge Breyer tapped it once before handing it to her clerk. She looked at Diddy for the first time all morning. Her eyes narrowed. You may want to advise your client, Ms. Marquez, she said dryly. The court will tolerate no further surprises. And with that, the courtroom emptied again, buzzing, breathless, and balanced on the edge of something much bigger than anyone had expected. The afternoon session was meant to be the turning point. By 1:45 p.m., every seat in courtroom 5A was filled again. The media hadn't even taken lunch. Most had used the break to dissect the morning's unsealed communications on air, talking heads spinning theories about what the phrase leverage will be honored could possibly mean. Speculation ran wild. Did Diddy have federal protection? Was he an informant? A victim? Or worse, part of a hidden deal that implicated people far beyond the music industry? But now, attention turned to what the court had scheduled weeks in advance. A high-profile witness cloaked in secrecy, codenamed only as Witness Z in court documents. Their testimony was expected to shift the balance decisively, perhaps even introduce new charges. Diddy remained seated at the defense table. No visible change in demeanor. No talking, no notes. Just that same impenetrable stillness that had become unsettling to even his own lawyers. Marquez sat beside him, lips pressed in a firm line, eyes never leaving the bench. Judge Breyer tapped her gavel once. Court is now back in session. Prosecution, please proceed. Jerome Nance stood quickly. Your Honor, at this time, the government calls its next witness, designated as Witness Z under protective order. This individual was scheduled to testify remotely via encrypted video stream due to the sensitive nature of their involvement and risk to personal safety. He motioned toward the screen set up near the jury box, though it hadn't yet flickered to life. Judge Breyer nodded to the bailiff. Activate the secure line. The clerk typed rapidly at a terminal, and a loading screen appeared on the monitor. The room hushed. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Still nothing. A soft buzz filled the silence, a technical delay, perhaps. The clerk leaned over to whisper to the bailiff, then walked to the bench and handed the judge a small folded note. She opened it, read for several seconds, then set it down deliberately. The slight tension in her shoulders gave it away. Something was wrong. The court has just received an emergency notice from the Department of Justice, she said, scanning the room. The individual scheduled to testify as Witness Z has withdrawn from testimony, citing concerns for their immediate personal safety. Whispers exploded like firecrackers across the courtroom. Nance's face flushed red. Your Honor, this witness was confirmed, cleared, and secured. I was not informed of any withdrawal. Neither was the court, Breyer responded coolly. The official submission came through the DOJ secure channel within the last 10 minutes. Then I request an emergency recess to re-establish contact with the witness and evaluate the claim, Nance shot back. Marquez stood immediately. Objection. The witness's credibility is already in question. We move to strike any mention of this individual from the record until presence can be guaranteed. Nance turned sharply. Counsel is fully aware of the witness's importance. This isn't a tactic, it's a threat. That's what we're dealing with. The judge raised a hand. Enough. She paused, letting the room settle before continuing. This court will not speculate on intimidation or conspiracy without evidence. However, given the witness's refusal to appear, regardless of reasoning, we cannot proceed with their testimony today. She turned to the prosecution. Do you believe this witness was threatened? Nance hesitated. I believe someone in Mr. Combs' orbit had the motive and means to issue a credible threat. Marquez scoffed under her breath. Breyer's eyes narrowed. Do you have evidence of that? Not direct, Nance admitted. But circumstantial alignment exists. The witness made contact with our office only last night to express concern after an unmarked vehicle was observed outside their secure location. And did you report this incident to Federal Protection Services? The judge asked. We did. They swept the area and found no tracking devices or unauthorized access. But the witness remained unsettled. Marquez rose again. Your Honor, I respectfully remind the court that unsubstantiated fear, especially from an anonymous source, should not be admissible or influence court proceedings. This is a trial, not a tabloid column. Breyer let the silence linger before speaking. This court will not allow fear to dictate the course of justice. However, I agree that the absence of this witness at such a pivotal moment must be formally reviewed. She glanced toward the clerk. File a formal request to the DOJ. I want a full report on why witness said failed to appear, including any and all threats, protections offered, and recommendations moving forward. Until then, testimony is suspended. The witness remains on the docket pending verification. She then addressed both parties. This court also reserves the right to subpoena members of the Federal Protection Unit involved, if inconsistencies are found in their reporting. That line landed like a blow. The room shifted again, not just tension, but confusion. This wasn't just about Diddy anymore. Now, the structure protecting this trial, one meant to ensure safety, integrity, and truth, seemed compromised from the inside. Meanwhile, in the hallway, media raced to spin the story. One outlet posted within minutes. Breaking, star witness fails to appear in Diddy trial, cites personal threat. A protected witness was scheduled to appear today via secure line. The sudden withdrawal has raised questions about interference, intimidation, and potential manipulation within the case. Back inside, Diddy leaned slightly toward Marquez, the first motion he'd made in hours. He whispered something only she could hear. She nodded once, expression unreadable. Court adjourned for the day at 2:30 p.m. Reporters scrambled outside. Cameramen ran backwards down the courthouse steps to capture Diddy leaving through the main entrance, flanked by his lawyers and a single unmarked security detail. No words. No expressions. Just presence. But inside the courthouse, everyone knew something had cracked. Witness ZS absence wasn't just a delay. It was a warning. And no one, not even the judge, knew what was coming next. The courtroom felt colder the next morning. It wasn't the air conditioning, though the building's old vents hummed constantly overhead. It was something else. Something heavier. Something invisible but thick, like the pressure just before a thunderstorm breaks. The media crowd outside had doubled overnight. Footage of the missing witness said, headlines screaming about intimidation, and whispers of secret government involvement had ignited a firestorm across news outlets and social media. Even major networks broke away from scheduled programming to cover the ongoing chaos live. Inside Courtroom 5A, Judge Rosalind Breyer looked composed but weary. Her gavel hit wood with mechanical precision. Court is now in session, she said flatly. Everyone stood. Everyone Saturday. Everyone watched. Diddy had arrived early that morning, escorted by his legal team through a side entrance, avoiding the press entirely. He was dressed in a crisp black suit, no tie. His shirt collar was open, a subtle message of defiance. His posture was perfect, hands folded neatly in his lap, but his eyes were distant. focused on something that wasn't in the room. Judge Breyer wasted no time. "Before we begin," she said, eyes scanning the courtroom, "I want to address the court's expectations. We are operating under significant public scrutiny. The events of the past 24 hours, while unusual, do not alter the responsibility of this court to maintain order and pursue the truth. Today, we will resume with procedural questioning related to the newly admitted communications." She looked directly at Diddy. "Mr. Combs, as the defendant, you are not required to testify today. However, I will be asking you a direct question regarding the authorship and context of specific documents. Please confirm whether you acknowledge authorship of the following emails and communications." The clerk stood and began to read again, brief excerpts from the now unsealed packet. Each message was short but damning. References to containment, leverage, and clandestine deals. Mentions of third-party intermediaries and agreements beyond standard channels. When the reading concluded, Judge Breyer spoke again. "Mr. Combs, are you the author of the communications read into the record?" The entire room seemed to lean forward as one. Diddy didn't answer. Judge Breyer paused. "Mr. Combs, I'll repeat the question. Do you acknowledge authorship of the emails and messages submitted under seal and now read into the record?" Still nothing. Marquez, visibly uneasy now, leaned toward her client and whispered something. He didn't respond to her either. Judge Breyer sat back slowly. "Mr. Combs, the court requires an answer." Diddy shifted in his seat, just slightly, but that was enough to trigger a flurry of murmurs from the press benches. Slowly, deliberately, he stood. No one spoke. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at the prosecution. He looked forward, at the center of the room, as if staring through the wall itself. Marquez tried to whisper again, but he gently raised one hand to signal her to stop. Then, without a word, Diddy stepped away from the defense table and began walking toward the exit. Gasps erupted. The courtroom exploded into chaos. "Mr. Combs." Judge Breyer's voice cut through the confusion like a blade. "You are not dismissed from this courtroom. You are under active trial." He didn't stop. Marquez stood up, reaching out instinctively. "Sean, sit down," she hissed. But he was already past the bench. Two U.S. Marshals moved forward, unsure of whether to act. One hesitated, looking to the judge. The other flinched toward Diddy but then stopped when Diddy turned his head slightly, a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He reached the doors. The bailiff started to rise. "Judge, should we?" "Hold," Judge Breyer ordered. Everyone froze. Diddy pushed the door open and walked out. For a moment, the courtroom remained silent, stunned by the sheer audacity of it. A defendant, mid-trial, had simply walked out of federal court. "Mr. Nance," the judge said coldly, "do you wish to file a motion of contempt?" Nance stood, flustered but recovering quickly. "Yes, Your Honor. The defendant is in direct violation of courtroom procedure and—" "I know what he's in violation of," Breyer snapped. "Motion granted. Bailiff, notify courthouse security. Lock exits. Issue a detainment order if he leaves the premises." "Should we arrest him?" asked one of the marshals, now at the side of the bench. Breyer hesitated. It was a rare moment of uncertainty for her, and everyone noticed. "No," she said finally. "Do not escalate this. He may return willingly. We will suspend court for 1 hour to allow him the opportunity to reappear voluntarily. If he does not, I will issue a bench warrant." She turned to the room. "Court is in recess." The gavel hit the block with a force that echoed off the marble walls. Outside the courtroom, reporters had already caught wind of the walkout. Cameras swiveled in every direction, trying to catch a glimpse of Diddy. Phones buzzed. Microphones went live. "He just walked out," one stunned anchor reported, barely able to keep up with her earpiece. "Ladies and gentlemen, in an unprecedented moment, Sean Diddy Combs has walked out of court mid-proceedings without permission. The judge has ordered a temporary recess and may issue a bench warrant shortly." Marquez stood in the hallway, hands on her hips, staring at the exit like it might answer her questions. She didn't chase after her client. She didn't call him. Back inside the courtroom, a slow murmur grew among the remaining attendees. Legal analysts, journalists, even the prosecution looked less angry and more stunned. This wasn't just a stunt. It felt like a message. By 12:05 p.m., a security officer confirmed, Diddy had left the courthouse entirely. His SUV had pulled away from the underground parking garage 10 minutes earlier. Court resumed briefly to confirm what everyone already knew. Judge Breyer issued an official suspension of proceedings until further notice. "This court is not a stage," she said coldly. "And it will not be used for dramatics. But I will not ignore what just occurred. A formal summons will be issued. Mr. Combs has until noon tomorrow to return, or this trial will proceed under default conditions, and consequences will follow." She didn't say the word fugitive. She didn't have to. Everyone was already thinking it. By noon, the federal courthouse was no longer just a legal institution, it was the epicenter of a media storm. The moment Diddy's SUV pulled out of the underground garage, everything changed. Live footage of the tinted black vehicle, weaving through side streets to avoid the press mob, ran on a continuous loop across every major network. News choppers hovered overhead. Social media exploded with hashtags. #Diddy walkout. #trial suspended. #where is Diddy. Outside Courtroom 5A, the hallway had turned into a war zone of microphones and smartphones. Reporters barked questions at each other more than at officials. Photographers climbed onto benches to get clearer shots through the windows. Within minutes, dozens of live streams had gone live with titles like "Diddy Escapes Trial" and "Defendant Flees Courtroom, Judge Furious." Inside, the judge had retreated to chambers. The bailiffs remained stone-faced. And Diddy's legal team, Marquez included, sat silently at the now half-empty defense table, faces blank, eyes darting between one another, trying to mask the chaos within. A court-martial approached the bench with a notepad in hand. "His off-property," he whispered to the bailiff. Cameras caught him leaving from the eastern exit, unescorted. The bailiff whispered the same to the clerk, who passed it to the judge through a side door. At 12:35 p.m., Judge Breyer re-entered the courtroom. "We have confirmation that the defendant has voluntarily exited the court premises. No formal statement or reason has been provided to this court by the defense team," she said, her voice sharp and steady. "Accordingly, proceedings will remain suspended until further notice." She paused, letting the weight of the situation land before continuing. "A federal summons will be issued effective immediately. Mr. Combs has until 12 p.m. tomorrow to present himself before this bench. Failure to do so will result in a bench warrant for contempt, obstruction, and possible bail revocation." Even the stenographer looked up at that last part. The courtroom was then cleared. The official day was over, but the real chaos was just beginning. By 1:15 p.m., every media outlet in the country had pushed their scheduled content aside. CNN ran the headline, "Diddy walks, trial suspended, judge demands answers." MSNBC aired live reactions from former federal prosecutors. Fox News asked the question, "Is this the beginning of a federal cover-up?" Outside, protesters began to gather. Some held handmade signs reading "Justice isn't silent," while others waved banners of support, "We stand with Diddy." The sidewalks were now a battlefield of conflicting narratives. Rumors spread like wildfire online. One TikTok user claimed they'd seen a convoy of black SUVs near Diddy's hidden estate in Alpine, New Jersey. Another tweet, which gained over 200,000 likes in just 2 hours, claimed the leaked government emails hinted at Diddy being an informant on high-level criminal networks within the entertainment industry. There was no proof. Just noise. But it was loud. At 2 p.m., a new development hit the airwaves. A leaked image appeared on Reddit and quickly went viral, a blurry photo of the sealed documents cover page, snapped from a distance, likely during the morning recess. It featured a watermark with the emblem of a federal agency. Not the Department of Justice. Not the FBI. It was DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, a government body more associated with artificial intelligence, surveillance tech, and experimental weaponry than with celebrity court cases. The internet ignited. Why would DARPA be involved in the Diddy trial? Was this case about national security all along? Is Diddy being silenced? It didn't matter how plausible the theories were. The visual alone was enough to push the narrative from courtroom scandal to government conspiracy. By late afternoon, Diddy's legal team had gone silent. No official statement. No press conference. That silence only amplified speculation. In their absence, a chorus of unofficial voices filled the vacuum. A former DEA agent appeared on a podcast and claimed that Diddy had been listed as a non-traditional intelligence asset back in 2015. A retired entertainment lawyer posted a thread about NDAs involving multiple artists, hinting that Diddy held evidence that could crush reputations and burn careers. And yet, through it all, Diddy himself remained off the grid. No Instagram post. No tweet. No sighting. His digital silence only deepened the mystery. And to the public, silence meant guilt or power. By 5 p.m., the courthouse released an official update. The trial was suspended indefinitely pending defendant reappearance, and all further proceedings would be sealed until further notice. That last line sent shockwaves. Sealed? Why? What was being discussed that needed to be locked away from public view? As the sun began to set over the city, a new protest emerged outside the courthouse. This one louder, angrier. Crowds now chanted, "Unseal the truth." And where's the deal, Diddy? Police formed barricades. Riot vans idled nearby, just in case. By 7 p.m., #Diddy trial had been replaced by a darker tag. #Diddy leak. Everyone was expecting something bigger now. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, a smaller meeting was underway. 2 DOJ officials, 1 marshal, and Judge Breyer were seated in her private chambers. They weren't talking about courtroom protocol. They were talking about damage control. "The unsealing this morning should have never happened without full clearance," said one DOJ official, voice tight. "You said the file came from within," Judge Breyer replied, arms folded. "If that's true, then it was a sanctioned submission. Don't try to pin this on my courtroom." The second official leaned forward. "If Combs doesn't return by noon tomorrow, we'll need to classify this differently." "What do you mean?" asked the marshal. The official didn't answer directly. Instead, he slid a file across the table. The words "holding status, temporary asset classification, red" were printed in bold at the top. Judge Breyer's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a criminal case anymore, is it?" The room fell silent. By nightfall, the internet wasn't asking about the trial anymore. It was asking about the system. About who was really on trial. And why Diddy, of all people, walked out at the exact moment the walls started closing in. One final clip went viral before midnight. Security footage, leaked from within the courthouse, showing Diddy walking toward the exit. No security. No resistance. Just calm, defiant steps. He paused for a moment at the door, looked up at the camera, and then pushed it open. The clip ended. But the questions had only just begun. By 6 a.m., the entire country had woken up to a new reality. News tickers on every major channel screamed the same thing in variations. Diddy missing after walking out of court. Federal investigation deepens. DARPA document leak sparks national security questions. Is Diddy a protected asset or a federal target? The media wasn't just reporting the story anymore. They had become part of it. Footage of Diddy leaving the courtroom, his head high, steps deliberate, looped endlessly across television and social media. But it wasn't the walkout that sent shockwaves this time. It was what came after. An anonymous post on a whistleblower forum, allegedly from a former court clerk, claimed the sealed envelope given to Judge Breyer had included correspondence from DARPA and an internal memo titled Subject, Asset Protocols, SC, Priority Level Red. The image included in the post was blurred, cropped, and unverified. But none of that mattered. The internet doesn't wait for verification. Within hours, #DARPA trended alongside #Diddy trial and #containment leak. Major podcasters hosted emergency live streams with ex-analysts, conspiracy theorists, and YouTubers dissecting the alleged connection. The core question: why was a defense agency involved in a celebrity criminal trial? And more pressingly, where was Diddy? At 9:15 a.m., TMZ reported that federal marshals had visited multiple properties linked to Diddy in New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. All were empty. Surveillance cameras had either been wiped or disabled. No trace. No signal. No phone pings. It was like he had disappeared off the face of the earth. But that only escalated things further. CNN ran a special report titled From Mogul to Ghost, The Vanishing of Sean Combs, which included a segment from a retired CIA officer who remarked, "It's extremely rare for someone to walk out of federal court and vanish without at least one breadcrumb being left behind. Unless they were never meant to be found." It was the kind of statement that wouldn't have been taken seriously in any other context. But now, it was front-page material. At 10:30 a.m., the leak intensified. An internal email chain, again unverified, surfaced on a fringe news platform. It allegedly showed communication between a DARPA security director and a DOJ cybersecurity liaison, dated 3 months before the trial began. From DARPA-operations at secure.gov to DOJ-security clearance at justice.gov. Subject: Asset SC_3947. Combs. Monitoring continues as instructed. Compliance remains stable. No exposure so far. If court proceedings escalate, invoke Protocol Theta. Do not allow public scrutiny to compromise operational secrecy. The final sentence hit like a shockwave. Operational secrecy. Was this trial just a performance? A distraction? A calculated risk? News outlets couldn't get enough. By noon, press briefings became battlegrounds. At the DOJ's daily press conference, reporters were relentless. Is Sean Combs listed as a federal asset? Why was DARPA connected to this case? Why has the trial been suspended indefinitely with no federal statement? The spokesperson, clearly underprepared, stuck to vague denials. There is no official connection between Mr. Combs and any agency of the federal government outside of the scope of this ongoing investigation, she read from a typed statement. But it didn't help. The public wanted answers, and every non-answer only added fuel to the fire. Back on the streets, the courthouse was surrounded. Not by police, but by people. Hundreds of protesters, spectators, and media figures had set up camp across from the building. Makeshift signs read, "The people demand truth." Diddy knew. They silenced him. Unseal everything. It wasn't a legal trial anymore. It was an event. A symbol. Some came out of support. Others came to see the collapse. One protester screamed into a megaphone, "If they can bury someone like him, imagine what they are doing to people without a camera on them." Then, at 2:42 p.m., the narrative took another sharp turn. A verified journalist from The Intercept posted a high-resolution image of a stamped cover sheet, allegedly from within the courtroom archive. The sheet bore the following classification line: Operational Containment Level 4, Red Channel. Access restricted, only department-level clearance and presidential authority applies. Subject, SC Theta contingency activation pending, unauthorized disclosure risk, extreme. The photo was cropped just enough to avoid revealing full contents. But it was real enough to send social media into overdrive. That was the moment when everything shifted. It was no longer about Diddy's guilt or innocence. It became a question of who had the power to protect him, or silence him. By 4 p.m., former NSA contractor Graham Fell appeared on a live stream with 1.2 million viewers. His take was chilling. Either Diddy was cooperating with a government body on something that has nothing to do with his music or image, or he stumbled onto something and they cut a deal to keep him quiet. Walking out of court wasn't defiance, it was prearranged. That courtroom? It was theater. Within minutes, the quote was clipped and posted across Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. #Courtroom Theater. #SC_Theta. #Where is Diddy? Meanwhile, Diddy's verified social accounts remain dormant. Instagram, no posts in 3 days. Twitter, silent. TikTok, comments turned off. It was like he'd gone dark by design. Some fans claimed he was off-grid for protection. Others said it was the government who made him disappear. One account even faked a live stream from inside a forested area with fake night vision and audio distortion, claiming Diddy's safe with former intelligence agents. The post was fake, but it got 3.5 million views before being taken down. Then came the final headline of the day. Breaking, courtroom lockdown issued after new threat received. At 6:30 p.m., Courtroom 5A was placed under federal lockdown after an untraceable message was sent to the courthouse's official email. You opened the wrong door. Shut it, or someone will do it for you. The IP address was spoofed through over 30 global proxies. The threat level was marked severe. Judge Breyer and her staff were escorted from the building under protection. The courtroom, once a place for public record, was now an armored vault. No press allowed. No future sessions scheduled. The last message from the DOJ? We are assessing the situation. But nobody believed that anymore. By 9 p.m., the internet wasn't asking where's Diddy. It was asking, what the hell did he know? And why are so many people trying to keep it quiet? The next morning arrived with the buzz of static and sirens. New York City, usually immune to panic, had a different energy. Quiet, cautious, alert. Police cruisers were parked outside every federal building downtown. Civilian drones hovered illegally above rooftops, broadcasting shaky live feeds of the courthouse. The streets were crowded again, but this time not just with press. Now, there were guards. Dozens of them. Uniformed officers lined the courthouse steps. Federal agents in plain black suits scanned the growing crowd. The official explanation? Standard security protocols. But nobody believed that anymore. At 9 a.m. on the dot, Elizabeth Marquez, Diddy's lead defense attorney, stepped out onto the courthouse plaza and walked straight into a wall of microphones. It was the first time anyone from his team had spoken publicly since the walkout. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice steady but eyes hollow from lack of sleep. "I'm here on behalf of my client, Sean Combs, to provide a formal statement regarding yesterday's proceedings and the ongoing media speculation." The press leaned in. Phones lit up. Streams went live. "My client left the courtroom yesterday out of concern for his personal safety," Marquez continued. "This is not an admission of guilt, nor an act of contempt. It is a direct response to the increasingly erratic and threatening circumstances surrounding this trial, circumstances this court has yet to adequately address." One reporter shouted, "Is Diddy in hiding?" Marquez paused, then spoke carefully. "Mr. Combs is in a secure location. He is not in custody, and he has not fled. He has, however, taken measures to ensure his well-being after multiple federal agencies failed to disclose the full nature of sealed evidence used against him." The implication was clear. Diddy hadn't run from justice. He had run from whatever was controlling it. Another reporter yelled, "Are you saying the government is threatening your client?" Marquez stared at the press, unflinching. "I'm saying the truth of this case is bigger than anyone expected, and certain entities would prefer it remain buried." With that, she turned and walked back into the building. And just like that, the press conference ended. But the reaction? It had only begun. Within 15 minutes, her statement was being analyzed across every major network. Legal experts debated its implications while political commentators speculated about cover-ups. Meanwhile, social media had split into two violently passionate factions. Team Diddy, he's a whistleblower. A target. They are trying to silence him like they did others before. Diddy deflects, classic celebrity move. Make yourself the victim and run from the truth. Don't fall for it. But most weren't arguing guilt or innocence anymore. They were debating what Diddy had stumbled into, and why the courtroom looked more like a containment site than a place of justice. At noon, the prosecution fired back. Jerome Nance held his own press conference in front of the U.S. Attorney's office. Wearing a Navy suit and flanked by two assistants, he looked visibly frustrated but determined. "This morning, defense counsel made several inflammatory and false claims," he began. "Let me be perfectly clear. The Department of Justice has not, and will not, threaten or endanger any defendant in our custody or under trial." He held up a binder of documents. "This case is built on evidence. Not secrets. Not theories. Not fiction." Then came the accusation. Mr. Combs' walkout was a strategic stunt designed to delay proceedings and confuse the public. "We believe it was calculated, deliberate, and in direct violation of courtroom protocol. We are prepared to pursue contempt charges and expand the scope of this investigation to include obstruction." The press swarmed him with follow-ups, but Nance refused to elaborate. He'd drawn his line in the sand. Now it was up to the public to choose which side to stand on. That choice came loud and fast. By 2 p.m., thousands had gathered outside the courthouse. This time, the energy was explosive. Crowds chanted, "Unseal the files. Let him testify. Truth doesn't hide." Homemade banners showed stylized images of Diddy wearing a blindfold, standing in front of the Capitol. Another depicted him sitting on a throne, surrounded by shadowy figures marked FBI, DOJ, and DARPA. The courthouse, once a symbol of due process, now looked like the front line of a revolution. At 3 p.m., the hashtags changed again. #court chaos. #justice or cover up. #Diddy files. Protesters clashed with counter-protesters. Police created barricades. One woman live-streamed from the courthouse steps, tears streaming down her face. "My brother's been locked up for 5 years over nothing. You think Diddy gets treated this way if there's no reason? He knows something. Let him speak." That video alone got 12 million views in 3 hours. Then, at 4:30 p.m., the court issued an unprecedented notice. A court order, publicly posted and stamped by Judge Breyer herself. The defendant, Sean Combs, is hereby ordered to present himself to the court by 12 p.m. tomorrow. Failure to do so will result in the activation of federal enforcement protocols, including but not limited to compulsory summons, bench warrant, and escalation to national jurisdictional authority. What wasn't in the document was the most telling. There was no mention of resuming trial. No scheduled hearings. No reference to Witness Z or the DARPA-linked materials. Just one instruction. Show up. Or disappear. By nightfall, the world was watching. The New York Times posted an editorial titled "When the Courts Can't Handle the Truth" that questioned whether the justice system was even in control anymore. A Vox article laid out a timeline of Diddy's legal troubles against major federal tech initiatives, finding odd overlaps in dates and locations. Meanwhile, YouTubers, TikTokers, and streamers were now dissecting government declassification memos from the Cold War, trying to draw connections. It didn't matter how far-fetched it was. The narrative had fractured, and facts were now just suggestions. At 10 p.m., a final message lit up the screens of millions. A simple post on Diddy's verified X, formerly Twitter, account. "I'll speak. Not to them. To you. Tomorrow. Noon." That was it. No photo. No video. Just a timestamp and a promise. It was retweeted over 500,000 times in 30 minutes. Speculation surged. Would he show up in court? Was he going live from a secure location? Would he leak the files himself? The internet didn't sleep. And neither did the city. Because one thing was now crystal clear. At noon tomorrow, something was going to break. Whether it was the truth, the court, or the system holding it all together. The world held its breath. Every network, every social platform, every live stream was tuned in. Even those who hadn't followed the trial from the beginning now sat glued to their screens. Offices paused meetings. Classrooms rolled in televisions. The Nasdaq trading floor fell silent as one of the wall monitors switched to YouTube. All eyes on the clock. 11:59. Courtroom 5A had been cleared hours earlier. Not even Diddy's legal team was allowed inside. Federal marshals patrolled every corner of the courthouse. Black SUVs with tinted windows had lined the building's perimeter. And high above, for the first time in its history, a no-fly zone had been established over Lower Manhattan. Inside chambers, Judge Rosalind Breyer sat alone at the bench. No robe. Just silence. A file sat unopened in front of her. A red cover. Bold stamp. Classified, Theta Protocol. She hadn't touched it. Not yet. 12 p.m. Across the world, a stream went live on Diddy's verified account. A black screen. No intro music. No graphics. Just static. Then, a voice. His voice. "Let me speak plainly." The camera faded in. Diddy sat alone in a dimly lit room. No visible background. No legal team. Just a single mic and the faint hum of what sounded like air circulation behind him. "I walked out of that courtroom because it stopped being about truth," he said. It became about control. About power. About silence. He paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. "I was asked to cooperate with federal agencies years ago. At first, I didn't question it. They said it was about national security, about helping the government. But the truth is, I didn't know what I was being pulled into." Across the internet, chat windows exploded. Theories confirmed. Doubts reignited. "I signed things I shouldn't have signed. Let them install things I didn't understand. They promised immunity. Promised containment. But when this trial started, when they saw what might come out, they got scared." He looked directly into the lens. "And now they are trying to bury it. Me." A moment of silence. "I won't let them." The feed cut to black. But before anyone could scream hoax, another video replaced it. This one wasn't Diddy, it was footage. Surveillance footage. Screenshots. Clips stitched together from documents, security cams, encrypted chats. No narration. No timestamps. Just content. A conference room inside a defense agency with Diddy seated at the table. A contract marked classified, non-traditional asset integration with his signature at the bottom. A footage from a drone, zoomed in on a building in Las Vegas, the same one referenced in the unsealed court emails. An audio clip, a government official saying, "Here's our link to the industry. Let him play the game, as long as he reports back." Then a final screen appeared. "If I don't show up in court, know this, what I'm showing you now, is the truth they were trying to contain." The stream ended. Total duration, 4 minutes, 57 seconds. The world was never the same after that. Back at the courthouse, chaos was already erupting. The judges' chambers were evacuated under federal order. Marquez tried to force her way into the courthouse, demanding to speak on record. She was turned away. Outside, protesters now numbered in the thousands. And for once, they all chanted the same thing. "We believe him." By 12:30 p.m., the DOJ issued a statement. The materials released today are under formal review. While we cannot verify the origin or authenticity of all documents at this time, we are committed to transparency and justice. The department has not engaged in any illegal containment strategy involving Mr. Combs. But no one cared. Because 15 minutes later, WikiVault, a known whistleblower archive, released an indexed folder titled Project Theta, the Diddy Files. Inside, hundreds of documents, audio logs, transaction records, flight manifests, evidence showing years of collaboration between Diddy and a rotating cast of shadowy government consultants, tech firms, and political operatives. Most damning was a memo from 2018. Subject SC is growing increasingly uneasy. Recommend psychological containment strategy. Trial exposure is minimal. Court theater will satisfy public if managed properly. That line sent ripples through every legal institution on earth. Court theater. Within hours, countries issued public statements demanding clarification from U.S. intelligence agencies. The United Nations called an emergency meeting. The Senate Intelligence Committee announced a formal investigation into unorthodox collaborations between public figures and federal defense programs. A motion was filed to have Judge Breyer testify under oath. But it didn't stop there. Diddy's release shattered more than just courtroom protocol. It cracked the illusion of institutional integrity. People started looking at other trials, other sealed files, other missing testimonies. It was the first domino. And it was still falling. As for Diddy, he didn't return to court. The noon deadline passed. No SUV. No courtroom reentry. No statement. Instead, at 2 p.m., a pre-scheduled social post appeared. You asked where I went. You should have been asking why they let me leave. D. And that was it. No arrest followed. No warrant was enforced. Because nobody wanted to be the first to answer what came next. Epilogue. 1 month later, the Diddy trial was formally dismissed. The official reason? Procedural compromise due to unauthorized evidence exposure and external interference. No new charges. No final verdict. Just silence. Elizabeth Marquez resigned from law practice and disappeared from public life. Jerome Nance was reassigned to a non-public role. Judge Breyer retired 2 weeks after the WikiVault drop. And DARPA? No comment. But every day, people still scroll through the Diddy files. Searching. Decoding. Obsessing. Because no matter what they found, one question remained. Was Diddy the pawn, or the king?